Once upon a time, there was a young woman with long, flowing brown hair. She lived in a castle. She was not a princess, but rather one of the servants of the castle. Her job was to attend to the princess, all day and all night. Whatever whims the princess may have had, the woman would have to tend to. One day, the princess asked for a rose. "Get me the prettiest rose in all of the land. Do not go into the garden, for the garden is sacred. You must go out and find me this rose outside of the castle walls." The woman gladly accepted, for it meant getting out of the castle and away from the princess, who often treated her quite harshly. So she asked around among the knights, and one was kind enough to lend her a horse. She didn't have a horse of her own, being a servant, so it was very welcome. The horse, named Chestnut, was a mighty steed, and beautiful. She had ridden horses as a child quite often, before she had gone into the service of the castle, so she knew her way around a horse. She approached it carefully, laying her hand on its face, and making sure that it got used to her before she saddled up and went on her way. She galloped for what seemed to be about 4 hours. The sun was still high in the sky when she came across the great field of roses. She rode up, and she looked about at all of the roses. There were millions and millions of roses. As far as she could see, there was wild roses growing everywhere. She knew, as per the princess's orders, that she must pick the best. But to pick one out amongst all of these, how could she possibly have the time? She walked down the edges of the rose forest. The bushes were much higher than she was, so she was very careful to look up and to look down at every single rose. "What would you like, miss?" A voice came out of what appeared to be nowhere. She looked around, and when she looked back in front of her, she saw a tiny old man. I am searching for a rose." She was confused by his sudden appearance, and at his appearance in general. He couldn't be more than 3 feet high, and yet he seemed like any other old man. "Ah, I see," said the man to the woman. "Well, if you are looking for the prettiest rose, you will have to journey to the center. But it is a difficult journey, for you see this whole rose bush, a single rose bush, but it is formed in a maze. If you go in, you may never come out." The woman was worried. This seemed very dangerous, and even as a direct order from the princess, she was worried for her life. It would do the princess no good if she never came back. But the princess asked for the prettiest rose in all the land, and it was her duty to find and bring back the prettiest rose in all the land. "I see," she said to the man. "Well, if the rose is in the center of this maze, then that is where I shall go. Where's the entrance? The man gestured right next to him, and she noticed an entrance. She sweared was not there before. She thanked the man and entered the maze. She went a ways in. It was a straight path for some time, and she looked back expecting to see the entrance closed, but the man stood there, waving. A sincere but impish smile on his face. Finally, she reached the first split in the road. Left or right? Right or left? She decided both paths looked equally dangerous, really, with the thorns sticking out from the giant rosebush. So she turned left and went on her way. Time went on, and the sun set upon the land. She felt she must be lost, but she had to continue on. If she were to get lost in this maze, she certainly could never find her way back out. And so, as she went, she made sure to pluck a single leaf from each rose and place it on the ground. The roses were quite spread apart, luckily for her. A day passed, and then another, and then another. On the fourth day, she was getting tired. Luckily, she had found ponds with fresh water, and she was able to eat the leaves of the roses as she went. But she was surely lost. However, it was at this time that she broke through into a large field within the rosebush. She could see a figure standing by a small pool within the field that she stepped upon. But the figure was strange. It had hooves, crooked legs, and a bull's head. She recognized this from stories. It was a minotaur. Something found quite often in old stories of labyrinths. Dangerous creatures, and fond of riddles. She tried to sneak by the minotaur, but in doing so, its head turned and looked straight at her. She looked into its eyes, captivated. They weren't the evil, hellish eyes she was expecting, but rather they seemed almost kind. She was frozen with fear, nonetheless, as the minotaur took steps, slow and steady, towards her. "What is your purpose here?" The minotaur was commanding, but not angry. I have been sent on a journey to find the most beautiful rose. I was told by a old man that I could find this rose in the center of this maze. I wonder, is this the center? Are you guarding the rose? The minotaur looked at her, looked from her toes to the tip of her head, and contemplated for a minute. "This is not the center, but you have made it farther than most. But I ask again, what is your purpose here? Why do you go so far for another? The woman thought on the question for a minute. She knew this must be the Minotaur's riddle, and were she to answer incorrectly, it could cost her her life. After some time, she realized there was only one answer. There was the truth. There was no possible other answer she could give that could possibly be right. I am here as part of my duty to the princess, but also I do this for myself, for a way to prove that I can go out on my own and do something that would require great skill. And something like this, traversing this maze and finding my way, is precisely the type of adventure I've been looking for. And also I feel when I come home with that rose, I can show it to the masses, the people who have long since lost faith in the world. And maybe it will bring a smile to their faces. The Minotaur paused, and it seemed as if he smiled, though the woman could not tell if it was a smile of satisfaction or a smile of, well, hunger. The center of the maze is that way. The Minotaur pointed at what seemed to be another opening that had never been there before. But she could see, at the end of the opening, a single, or rather, the end of the hallway, let's say, that was through the opening. There was a single vine growing out of the ground, and atop it, a large and beautiful rose. It was a ways away, yet she could still tell there was no rose that could ever hope to match its beauty. She bowed to the Minotaur, thanking it, and went towards the rose, sitting on its vine pedestal. She looked down at it and noticed that thorns were all over the vine. But she knew that she had to snap it from its stem in order to bring it back to the princess. She reached down and, as was inevitable, pricked her finger. She jumped with a start, blood on her fingertip now. And then everything went dark, except for the rose. The rose shone in the darkness with a brilliant red light as it grew and it grew. And suddenly the light surrounded everything else. It continued to expand, and she could see the vines all around forming into sculptures and walls and great things of beauty. And after some time, the walls solidified, the thorns receded, and she found herself standing in a throne room made entirely of the vines and nature. the Minotaur stepped up behind her and said to her, "You have shown kindness. You have shown the traits of a great ruler. This castle that has grown around you is now yours. You answer only to those that you wish to answer to. You are our queen, and may your subjects be many in the days to come." The Minotaur knelt before her, and beside him, the old man from before was kneeling as well. "I shall go to your old kingdom, where the people suffer. For I know, too, that they suffer, for I have seen it in your eyes. I will bring those people to your kingdom, so they may live under your rule, under your justice, and they will be happy. We will be sure that they are happy." And so it was done. All of the people from the old kingdom, even some of the royalty that was unhappy with how the kingdom was being run, the dukes, the duchesses, many of the knights, they all made their way to the new Vine Castle and created a town around it. The vines, whenever a new building was erected, would come and shelter it from whatever attacks may come. Several times, the woman's old kingdom would attack, but each time, the vines would repel any attackers without a single casualty done to the kingdom of vines. Eventually, the old royals realized they could not survive without the support of the people. So they too, those that wished to survive, joined the kingdom of vines. And they too found happiness under the new queen's rule. And they all lived happily ever after. The end.